My name is Axel Kvaran. I live in the greater Reykjavik area, and I'm an airline captain, and I've been living in Iceland all my life. I've always been interested in my immediate surroundings and generally the development of the city. I don't want to run for an office or anything. I'm just not comfortable with that. But I have in the past sent some emails about things that I would have wanted to make better. In our area, there's actually long, steep steps, and I would have really liked to have them bicycle and wheelchair and stroller accessible. I introduced the project on Better Reykjavik a few years ago. It is basically a web page that you enter. It's very easy to navigate. You just basically enter a new suggestion and you can write a little text and you can put in a picture and you can write why you like it. Why is that necessary for our community? You can actually see how many people voted for your project. The way it works is that they have a certain amount of money, an amount that gets distributed to the projects that get the highest votes. I don't know if it's 10 or 15 projects or something. I've seen some very nice projects come into place. Most of them are things like exercise equipment, cycling paths, toys for the children for public use, small things like that. And that's sort of what they're looking for.
Like Axel, most of us have ideas and suggestions on how to make our cities better places. Perhaps we'll wax lyrical to a partner on how traffic could be controlled better, or moan to a neighbour about the lack of green space. But the truth is, most people are uncertain where or who to take their opinions to. Around the world, there are calls for citizens to be given a voice beyond the electoral cycle. Of course, the idea of empowering communities isn't a new one. In fact, many places have been doing it for a while. From participatory budgeting in Porto Alegre in Brazil, allowing citizens to have a say on various spending decisions, to Switzerland's federal system, where the public can vote on specific policies. And now more than ever, the powers of tech have bridged the gap between citizens and decision makers, between the experts and the people on the street. Even in science, a field some say is typically restricted to white-coated brainy types, technology has opened the door to anyone who owns a smartphone to be part of the research process, which, by the way, is 85% of the globe. On this episode of Common Ground, we're in Iceland and the UK to hear how to strengthen local democracy with a little help from technology. Stay with us. This is a podcast by Toposophy. For more than a decade, Toposophy has been inspiring and informing its clients on how to transform places, whether they're neighbourhoods, cities, regions, or whole countries. The Toposophy team works with international organisations, multinational brands, and government agencies around the world, leading them every step of the way to find placemaking and marketing solutions that are built to last. As constantly curious people, the team loves to collect game-changing ideas that are transforming other sectors and draw valuable lessons for the future of places. This podcast series, curated by the Toposophy team, is just one example of how these valuable ideas are brought to life.
My name is Robert Bjanarson. I'm the president of the Citizens Foundation. We are an Icelandic US nonprofit.
The Citizens Foundation is the organisation behind the Better Reykjavik platform that Axel was talking about at the beginning of the show. It's helped almost 50 countries develop their own version of Better Reykjavik. The impetus behind the initiative? Healing the distrust between citizens and their governments.
The global financial meltdown comes to Iceland. The government in this tiny island in the North Atlantic.
Here in Reykjavik, the financial situation just gets gloomier and gloomier.
When we started the Citizens Foundation in 2008, we were already facing a massive trust crisis in government, basically following the financial crisis. And in Iceland, it was especially bad, where 3 sort of big commercial banks, they all went bankrupt over a period of 10 days. And trust in the parliament had plummeted down to like 6%. So our focus as a nonprofit civic tech organization is to think, how can we use technology to empower citizens and to empower politicians and people working in government to have better communication.
The idea that everyone is able to have their say is a necessary pillar of democracy, as well as the notion that governments are actually listening. And now, in the era of the internet and social media, in some ways it's never been easier to be heard. But as anyone who's entered into a war of words over a bit of gossip on Facebook would know, these technologies aren't the most conducive for an open, constructive conversation. Add to that the bots built to disrupt elections and the ever-polarized political discourse, and it seems as though these platforms might be doing more harm than good.
So we've seen social media, the internet, many scandals coming up in the past few years undermine trust, just general in society and in our institutions as well. And we believe that governments and citizens should be talking a lot more, and we believe they should be talking using tools that are designed for constructive, productive dialogue.
So how are the Citizens Foundation's platforms different to your standard social media?
They are designed to, just with a very specific goal of empowering a conversation between government and citizens. It's not designed to maximize engagement or anything like that. For example, we have a deliberation system, which is quite different from the commenting system in Facebook, for example. It's a bit more limited and it's more constructive in collecting pros and cons for every idea that comes in. And it's not possible to have long threads of people having a threaded discussion, for example. So there's actually a part of the solution in terms of getting a better and a healthier dialogue is to put some limitations on the conversations. But those are something that, for example, the social media companies, if they would do something like this, they would reduce a lot of their conversations and their advertisement revenue would drop down the floor.
So the idea behind the Citizens Foundation is to remove the equation engagement equals profit. And their flagship platform, aptly named Your Priorities, does just that.
So Your Priorities is basically an open source project. Anybody can go there, they can download the Your Priorities platform. It's like a toolbox.
In 2017, Your Priorities made history by helping the city of Reykjavik crowdsource ideas for its education policy. It was the first time this had ever happened in Iceland. The topic in question? What high-level skills should students in Reykjavik have when leaving secondary education?
So the committee asked the public to participate on debating and prioritizing which of those high-level skills were the most important. So the output of that process then went back into the drafting work and helped to influence then the final decision of 5 different sort of categories of high-level skills. And then they asked the public on Better Reykjavik again, come up with ideas on how we can achieve those specific goals. And there was 1,000 people who submitted ideas and debate points. And it was just really a lot of interesting things, a lot of sort of modern things like meditation, things like that are slowly becoming also scientifically valid things and all of that.
So Your Priorities helps dialogues flourish, but it can also be used in even more direct ways by giving citizens the chance to decide how a place's budget is spent at a hyper-local level. At the beginning of the show, Axel told us how he was able to submit a proposal for his neighbourhood. Now, let's get a bird's-eye view on how that particular project that uses the Your Priorities tools works.
So first, the government sets up the project in terms of what they want to achieve. They set out a budget. Like in Iceland, it's 5.6 million euros every 2 years, so it's a significant amount of money. So the first is an idea generation stage. So then citizens have the opportunity to submit ideas.
It's not quite at the voting phase yet, but every idea has a chance to receive general feedback.
And like last year, we had 1,700 ideas submitted. So then there is a long phase, that was now over 6 months, where the government needs to evaluate those 1,700 ideas. And there's some of them are not going to fit into the budget at all. Maybe there's some of them are joke ideas or something.
Just an aside, one of the most popular ideas that never made it was a proposal to erect a statue of Kanye West at a swimming pool in West Reykjavik.
Maybe some are ideas about building something on a land that the city doesn't own. Maybe some of the ideas are just too big. And then there's maybe 1,000 ideas left out of those 1,700. And then those go into the neighborhood committees. And they will then, for their neighborhood, choose 35 ideas that fit equitably. But all that complexity is hidden from the regular citizen. People click on a link, they choose their neighborhood, and then there's a little budget game, really. So at the top of the screen, you have the whole budget for your neighborhood, and then you see a list of different projects, and you can choose them. And each time you choose something, you see how much they cost, and then your budget is finished. It usually, I think the average time for people to vote is like 4 minutes or something. So it is very simple.
So cities are relying on their residents' local knowledge to make budgeting decisions. But while some issues can easily be spotted with the naked eye, there's plenty about the places we live that needs a little more studying. When cities need to make decisions about health and environmental policies or building new infrastructure, for example, the plans must be based on cold, hard science. And this science needs experts. Or does it?
Citizen science is the umbrella term that it's being used in order to describe the opening of the research process to the wider public. So it means that instead of scientists or research professionals carrying out the research process all by themselves, they actually also involve other people who are not professionals.
That's Professor Muki Haklay, co-director of the Extreme Citizen Science Group at the University College London. Muki believes that technology can revolutionise how we carry out scientific research, bringing in people from all walks of life to contribute, not just experts.
So the first thing is to understand that it's worth looking at citizen science through two lenses. One of them is science engagement, as in telling people to understand issues around air quality or a water issue or, say, tree coverage or other things. And the second aspect is what's called the participatory turn, where we see different experiments in cities to engage with their residents in different ways, say participatory budgeting. So we can see it as part of those different dialogues and the combination of those two areas, and then able in different ways to have more information, but useful information, and especially when you combine the data with the local knowledge and the local observations that people have about their neighborhood or about their area.
So Muki recognises the value of the ideas and knowledge of the everyday citizen. And just like Robert, he wants to use everyday tech to tap into this knowledge.
We all notice things like smartphones, which allow us to have actually quite a set of sensors in our pocket that can also transmit the information and share it or download information from remote servers and use it in different ways. And you could see a whole range of things that can be done with smartphones, from using the microphone to measure sound and noise, to using the camera to capture images of different phenomena that you see around. But when you combine that with the fact that society as a whole became much more educated, there are over 250 million people in the world who are in tertiary education. Those are people who are capable more than ever before to participate in a meaningful way in scientific processes. So if in the kind of, I don't want to call it a golden age of expert, but in previous eras, even into the 80s and the early 90s, there was a very big knowledge gap between the expert and people in the street. Now, you will find people with expertise and with knowledge everywhere.
This narrowing of the knowledge gap is ultimately beneficial for decision makers, giving them a wider-reaching set of data and insights.
So you can have a neighborhood where there is a noisy scrapyard in the center next to a school and kindergarten, and that bothers the residents for a very long time. But their complaint verbally that it's noisy are not effective. When the neighborhood, in this case, a place in South London called the Pips Estate in 2007, picked up noise meters and started taking measurement across the area, and over 6 weeks collected 1,100 measurements, they were able to demonstrate the level of noise in a way that it's relevant to the authorities.
And making the scientific process more participatory isn't just positive for the end result. The process itself is much more efficient too.
If a scientist wants to sample area around a town center or around a neighborhood, and they want to do it in a traditional way, they will need to put the research assistant on the phone, find out who are the people who are willing to provide access, find time when they are available, spend the time going there and giving the equipment, turn the formula into citizen science, ask people to join the process for whatever reasons and kind of design. And all you need to do is to send them the equipment, and they will do the rest of the work by themselves. In other cases, when you want, say, to cover things on a very large area, even on a medium-sized city, if you want to have information about every street, the cost of doing that in traditional science and sending, say, a car that will go around and collect all the information is very high. On the other hand, if you ask people to do it with their local understanding and local interpretation and across the city, suddenly you can have thousands of observers involving in the process. In Flanders, in Belgium, where they wanted to measure air quality, and with the support of a local newspaper in a project that was called Curious Nose, the project was giving 20,000 household measurement devices for air quality, something called diffusion tubes, and they installed it across the whole area, and that provided detailed map that are more detailed than anything that it's possible to do before.
And the beauty of the internet allows this scale and detail on a global level, meaning data can be pulled together from the four corners of the world to map out all sorts of things in seemingly remote places, from charting a town's wheelchair accessibility routes to informing humanitarian responses in times of disaster. So when it comes to participation both in governance and science, we can agree that the more the merrier. More data means more accurate results, and more voices means more representative democracy. But beyond just having the tech available, how can we actually get people to use it? When it comes to making policy decisions, people can often feel disengaged purely through the way things are presented. Take political manifestos, for instance, released when governments are actively trying to engage the electorate. These documents can often look more like a set of terms and conditions, and in the age of reels, almost archaic. So why can't things like funding and policy proposals break free of the snooze-inducing format of PDFs? Here's Robert again.
So when we started to look around in 2008, examples of e-democracy, we did find quite a bit of samples like EU projects, been funding experiments for a while. But what we also found is that you clicked on some of those experiments and they were totally bureaucratic. The least effective way of getting feedback on policy is to publish a PDF document and then have an input box underneath it. Because yes, you will maybe have some people who click on the PDF and read through it, But some people will not have the just cognitive really like capabilities to actually go through a whole policy document. But even with the people who have the capabilities of going through a whole document like that, who wants to go through a whole PDF policy document? At least I don't want to do that.
Robert wanted to prove that by gamifying these processes, the public could become more engaged, the information more accessible, and the entire process of government more transparent. So he set about making a game where players were tasked with creating their own fictional constitution. Of course, no real constitutions were redrafted or affected.
One of the things people often think, constitution, that must be some very complicated laws that I don't understand. But actually, when it comes down to it, each of the individual items that go into the constitution are not that complicated. Part of the game is to choose to play with like cards that are different types of constitution articles. We could come those different constitutional concepts down to like cards that are only with 60, 70 characters of text. So quite simple, in the end. To have a graphical way of breaking down, you have different categories, you have subcategories, and you have some art or photographs or something that help you to cognitively process what the subject of that part is, where a PDF document is just like an unpenetrable wall.
Gamifying processes to engage people isn't just about entertainment, it's about accessibility. And if we're serious about participation, we have to be inclusive of all the voices that are often sidelined from decision-making and debates.
So the ARIS online platform is a project by a government agency in Kyrgyzstan called ARIS. It's a local development agency. And it's one of many projects we've done with the World Bank.
The idea was to help the consultation process, asking residents of remote villages throughout Kyrgyzstan what their priorities were when it came to modernization. The discussion would then help inform the World Bank's investment in the country.
So there's been like many layers and the rounds of this. So there's a round where 500 villages have the opportunity to choose if they use the money on getting connected to the electricity grid, or they set up the hot water system, or whatever it is, a sort of basic infrastructure. So quite different from wealthy participatory budgeting projects in Europe, but we have such a huge appetite to participate. We have now over 500,000 people from Kyrgyz villages have participated. Then there's a website called peoplepowered.org, and they did an in-depth case study on this project in Kyrgyzstan, and which, amongst other things, concluded this project that empowered women in the villages, especially because they had access to have their voices to be heard.
Constructing platforms that are intuitive and accessible for all has been key to citizen science too. Here's Muki again.
The assumption that only literate people have knowledge is a very old assumption, and it's somewhat colonial, because it's trying to put hierarchy between people and arguing that people who don't have literacy are incapable of understanding the environment. And what we understand, and it should be obvious to anyone who work with different groups, there is a lot of knowledge. The part of the brain that is not used for reading is used heavily for understanding the environment, and we can appreciate this knowledge. And nowadays we are appreciating more and more, which is why even processes like the International Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, is actually recognizing the value of indigenous knowledge. WhatsApp turned out to be a very helpful tool for people, even with little literacy in literate societies, because of the ability to record things and take some pictures, so to use non-written communication within the tool. Me, myself, and my research group have carried out a project in the past 15 years demonstrating that you can design citizen science projects together with people who don't read and write. So we worked with non-literate hunter-gatherers, and we co-designed with them data collection tools And eventually we designed with them also data visualization tools. And the main purpose of this project was to demonstrate that if you want to co-create a citizen science activity, you can do it with anyone, anywhere.
But this doesn't mean there's no use for experts. Of course, they're still vital when it comes to interpreting data and putting plans into action.
The evidence from citizen science showed that actually people love the top-down project. And it makes sense. If you have a project that record, for example, problems in the cityscape, such as broken lampposts, potholes, other things like that, as a resident, you just want to contribute it because you expect someone to address the problem and then deal with that. The fact that we have experts and we have expertise is something that is hugely appreciated by participants in citizen science projects.
And it's not just collaboration amongst humans. Artificial intelligence is fast becoming a partner in citizen science too.
But also in scientific projects, we see examples where people are saying, you know what, if it helps you as a municipality to give me a whole pile of images so I can help you classify them, and then you use them in order to train an AI model, I'm willing to help you doing that.
And as Robert sees it, AI may also help sift through the increasing complexities in politics.
But what we see now is that, in a way, many of those decisions and ideas and what's happening in society, it's even like becoming too complicated for the smartest person in the room even to contemplate. We think that this would have been a science fiction talk like a year ago, but we actually, in our experience and what we're doing is that to use sort of the state-of-the-art AI models like GPT-4 to help you to analyze not only feedback from users, but also from open data, from government sources, even from transcripts and so on. It will help not only citizens, but it will also help the politicians.
So while AI will help streamline the processes of direct democracy, the tech already exists to help embed a culture of trusting local people, making it easier for them to provide thoughtful insights into their daily lives. And while it's true that we live in times when people feel somewhat helpless about major global crises such as conflict, soaring living costs and climate change, we also live in a time when people are more willing to support projects in their local area, projects in which they can see a tangible change being made to their surroundings. But public appetite for getting involved means nothing if it's not matched by the will of public servants, city planners, consultants, and academics to listen. To really embrace community engagement, it needs to be seen as an absolute must rather than a nice to have.
If we assume that it's integrated into research project routinely and get proper support from government as a way of generating knowledge, then you can think about different people participating in their daily citizen science projects, sometimes passively, sometimes actively. It becomes part of a routine practice in the design of different projects, and every scientist is trained to do such activities.
When it comes to democracy and democratic innovation, it is not only the government who is really like the entity that can just bring that as a service to citizens, because democracy is changing. And for democracy to change, it needs to be changed in this more bottom-up way.
I'm actually very happy with this project. The biggest thing about it is it's sort of a direct democracy. I think it eventually gives you a little bit a sense of belonging and that you actually have a saying in your community. Very small thing, but very rewarding for the people that live there.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Common Ground. Before we leave, here's what we can take forward from what we've just heard. It's clear how thoughtful and creative local people can be when given the tools to express what they need. When planning citizen engagement of all kinds, there are some basic signs that any planner or local authority should take into account. As Robert pointed out throughout the episode, trust is key, and transparency can come by involving civil societies in the co-creation of these platforms. When citizens become engaged, it's important that the conversations aren't a one-time thing. The dialogue around placemaking decisions should be continuous. It's also vital that the conversation centres around relevant challenges that people can easily relate to. And when it comes to how they engage, apps and surveys need to be easy, intuitive, and, where possible, fun to use. They should be designed with people of all backgrounds, literacy levels, and cultures considered. After all, inclusivity is key. At Toposophy, we've long believed in the power of presenting our ideas in an attractive and inspiring way. Why? Because ideas and strategies attractively presented are far more likely to stimulate exactly the type of engagement that we want. Next time on Common Ground.
Yeah, I agree that building digital twins is the way to go. I mean, what is the alternative? I mean, you can't go back to drawing on paper and having sort of all the data stored on paper. You need to digitalize all the data that you have. And the way to do that is to build a digital twin.
We're looking at how future-facing cities are using the metaverse to map key issues in urban planning and infrastructure. This podcast was developed, researched and produced by the experts at Toposophy and the Greek Podcast Project, with production assistance from Gaia Lutz.